The New York Times has filed a lawsuit against the Department of Defense over the Pentagon's new restrictions on press access.
The lawsuit was filed in the federal court in Washington, D.C. on Thursday. It named the Defense Department, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell as defendants.
Charles Statlander, spokesman for the Times, said, quote, "The policy is an attempt to exert control over reporting the government dislikes."
Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson said the American people don't trust these propagandists because they stopped telling the truth. So we're not going to beg these old gatekeepers to come back, and we're not rebuilding a broken model just to appease them.
Adam Schiff reacted, writing on X, Pete Hegseth removed respected journalists from the Pentagon because he feared their willingness to publish the truth. Then he brought in only some of the nation's most seasoned sycophants to take their place. While several news outlets like Associated Press, Washington Post and CNN were denied access to the Pentagon as they refused to accept the new restrictions, Matt Gaetz, the former congressman, was spotted at Wilson's briefing on Tuesday.
Former Congressman Matt Gaetz lashed out at CNN anchor Aaron Burnett for apparently questioning his journalistic credentials. Gaetz wrote on X in parts, "Oh, hey, CNN, thanks for covering my participation in today's Pentagon press briefing for One America News Network. You seemed interested in my qualifications. I served 8 years on the House Armed Services Committee and often asked the most penetrating questions of Democrats and Republicans who appeared before me. I can also confidently report that CNN is still not allowed in the building."
A bit of spice there from Matt Gaetz, as we might expect. It's always good. So, look, I mean, I think my views on this are probably somewhat predictable. I'm glad that the New York Times is suing. I think that it is important that journalistic outlets stand up for the freedom of the press. And it is, I think, notable that the new restrictions caused a walkout not only from the New York Times and the Associated Press and the Hill for that matter, but also from outlets that are fairly explicitly right-leaning, the Daily Caller, Fox News, and so on and so forth. So I'm glad that the Times is suing. Do you want to make a case for the defense or not? I don't know.
Washington leaks like a sieve, and the Pentagon is one of those actors in that enterprise that where stuff comes out that's not supposed to come out. And at times, there can be an argument made that has put people in danger. Information has not just come out through the regular press, but through hacks and released information. And, I could see a member of the Trump administration arguing that we have to stop that. And it's, frankly, it's not just been the Trump administration. There was a crackdown during the Obama administration on leaks. And, I think the Trump administration would argue that we're actually trying to do something about this now instead of just talking about the problem.
Yeah, that is certainly part of their argument. And in this new policy, one of the most contentious elements in it is a ban or a bar on members of the press, quote, soliciting information from people. But then one of the questions there is how do you define soliciting? I mean, in the nature of reporting, one is soliciting information all the time. And it is obviously a valid line of inquiry for Pentagon reporters to seek kind of insight into what's going on behind the scenes. And there appears to be an attempt to curb that quite narrowly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is another question of whether or not this actually matters or not. Are we making a big deal about something that at the end of the day it doesn't matter? If you just look at what happened with these boat strikes, the Washington Post, New York Times, still very well sourced inside the Pentagon and able to get their hands on information related to these stories that probably the Pentagon didn't want to come out.
Yeah, I think that is a valid point, and it is certainly the case that, to their credit, none of those organizations have sort of folded their tents and said, we're not going to cover the Pentagon. The question is, or the issue is, we're not covering the Pentagon from inside the building because we are not willing to submit to these requirements. On a lighter note, to a degree, are you amused by the Matt Gaetz thing and the various other elements where there's now this media war between all the people who walked out, which, as I say, encompasses a fairly broad spectrum, and very Trump-friendly outlets.
I mean, I think Matt Gaetz does make a valid point that he asks tough questions about the foreign policy apparatus, no matter of Republicans and Democrats. He's been highly critical of American foreign policy. I don't know that it's a flex to say that you signed a paper and agreed to limit your reporting abilities, and that's why you get to go and CNN doesn't. I mean, I think the harder thing to do is to not sign it and report from the outside. I imagine, though, that some of the most sensitive conversations and the way that these stories are reported don't always happen inside the Pentagon building.
Yeah.
They probably meet over, signal,
Yeah.
frankly, and in places that aren't so public. So I don't know how big of an impact it has on the ability of people that report on the Pentagon to get that information out. I'll be interested to see what happens with this lawsuit. I think it's another interesting thing to me is that there were other organizations apparently that wanted to join in with the New York Times, but the New York Times kind of wanted to go it alone. I don't know if that's like a flex on the New York Times as part of that, saying that, look, we want to fight this on our own. We kind of, I think in their eyes, think they stand above the rest when it comes to the depth and of their sources at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point, because there is a whole question in the media at the moment as to which organizations are more inclined to, I would say, submit to Trump demands. I mean, obviously, without getting into the whole CBS controversy, there's a massive issue because of the fact that they settled that case that Trump brought on, I would say, extremely spurious grounds about the 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris and all of that. And there have been various organizations that have been criticized for cozying up to the Trump administration by doing its bidding or by accommodating it in some way. Just briefly to circle back to the Pentagon stuff, I think that one of the main difficulties really right now is the people who did agree to go into the Pentagon. If Matt Gaetz wishes to argue that he's going in there and he's going to ask tough questions, that's okay. But there have been a number of people from other outlets in there sort of glorying in the way that they are there basically to support the administration, to cheerlead for the administration. And I think that's a very different thing,
Yeah, I mean, I think there is kind of a new brand of journalism that has sparked up really on the right and the left, where you have people that are more advocates than journalists, the rise of kind of the Substackification of journalists, where I think people see they could advance their careers more by having like a hard right or a hard left opinion. So I think, I think those people are probably more likely to sign something that says that they'll toe the line of a Republican, and then I'd be interested to see what happens if there's ever a Democratic. Hard for me to see really anybody other than the Trump administration taking steps like this, because just the way that they perceive the media as being so against them and they're constantly at war. But, I remember during the Obama administration, there were some leak investigations that many people in the press thought crossed the line. So it's not new for an administration to be at loggerheads with members of the media, but as all things Trump, he usually takes it just probably a little bit further than past administrations have.
For sure. And I actually think that phrase that you mentioned, the Substackification of journalism, that could be a whole conversation in itself, because those people break away from mainstream outlets, to go independent, but often the economics of the Substack thing mean, in fact, you're catering to what a specific audience wants to hear all the time. So there are drawbacks to either model, I think.
Oh, yeah. No, of course.
Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom, the California governor, says he's considering a run for president in 2028, but Oscar-winning actress Halle Berry says she has no interest in supporting him. More on that next.